Let me start with a little bit of background here. Today's session is part of Tuesday Tech at Plymouth Harbor. And Sandy Weiss, I don't know if Sandy's here. Ah, okay. You're the chair. Sandy is the chair of the Wellness Committee and asked Pat Anderson and me to try and determine what it is in a technical sense that the residents of Plymouth Harbor were most interested in and might most need. She asked Pat and I to do that because we both have some technical background. Pat was in technical education, and I spent 34 years with IBM, and about half of that was in maintenance service and reliability engineering. So we kind of fit fairly well for this particular topic. And the topic came out of the resident survey. If you remember a couple months ago, there was a survey that said, what are the things you're most interested in? We had a list. Far and away, the biggest one was getting help for your technical problems. So Sandy asked us to do that. We developed this presentation, and that's what you're going to see today. Of course, Summer is the wellness director, and Ann Casanova, who went to make the copies, is the program coordinator for the Wellness Committee. So with that, maybe let's get started. A little background. I already told you it was the number one thing on the survey. For those of you who might want to get up now and leave, this session is not going to answer your tech questions. What it's going to do, I hope, is tell you how to find the answer or get someone who knows the answer to your tech question. The number of tech questions, of course, is in the infinite. It's millions. But if you know how to find it, it's like looking in a dictionary. There are millions of words, but if you have some idea where you're going or what you're looking for, you can usually find it. I have this problem. Anyone in tech has this problem. Sometimes we use terms or jargon. I don't like that. I try and eliminate it, but if I do it, stop me. Throw something or yell or whatever. Handouts. If not now, shortly, everyone should have a handout. Every slide you see today, every screenshot we do is in that handout. They are going to match, so you don't need to worry about, he showed me something and where did that go and how did he get there, whatever. Everything that you're going to see today is in that handout. I know there's a temptation to hurry up and read the handout and flip through it and whatever, and you're welcome to it. But I hope more than anything that it helps you follow along, and when you leave, you'll have it. You won't have to worry about, oh gosh, I didn't write down what he said. Lastly, let me tell you what we're going to cover today. This session is really designed for Windows 10 and Mac. So if you're a PC user or a Mac user, this is pretty well where this is focused. It does not include iOS, which is the Apple system that runs on iPads and iPhones. It does not include Chrome or Android. But the principles that we're going to talk about apply to all of the machines. Matter of fact, apply to any kind of computing device. So although you may not see your reference to Chrome or whatever your favorite is, you will see general principles, and Mac and the PC will be used as the basis for looking at those. Here's what we're going to cover. Why we need support. The kinds of support we can get, where to get that support, and then finally we're going to talk about self-help, or you are the support. And for a lot of us, we know kind of what that feels like. We've done that before, and maybe we can have a few tips that might help us. Why we need support. Computers, personal computers, are the most complicated appliance today that's sold to the general public, far and away. It's because of a long, varied history, but we have this machine that is so complex and so complicated that most people have a great deal of difficulty using it. It's gotten easier over the years, and we're trying to develop better software and better interface to the machine, but it's not easy. The reason is flexibility. The flexibility is its biggest advantage. A PC or a Mac, you can add to it, you can change programs, you can create things, you can add hardware to it, you can add software to it, and I'll cover those two terms in just a second. The problem is flexibility equals complexity. And we're going to talk more about this as we go through. Complexity is the killer. Because the more complex it gets, the more difficult it is for us to remember all the things it took to make the complex thing work. So complexity is a problem, and we're going to talk more about that. What's inside your computer? Hardware. Hardware is basically things you can touch. A display screen, a capacitor, a resistor, that's all hardware. They're things you can touch. They come from something called the OEM. We're going to see this term a lot, so that's why I have it here. It's the original equipment manufacturer. That's the person who sold it to you. That could be Dell, it could be Apple, it could be anyone. If you bought Windows 10 from Microsoft, Microsoft would be the OEM for Windows 10. Software. Software is basically just instructions. They're code. They're written lines of text, numbers, and characters that tell the machine what to do. Turn on the screen, make it white, make the screen this size. Every bit of the pixels, every little thing you see on the screen comes from software. Software, there are two types. The operating system, Windows 10 and Mac are two operating systems, one from Microsoft, one from Apple. And there's also something called application software. Application software is like a word processor or a drawing program or email. These are all application software. In the world of smartphones and tablets, these are called apps, for short for application software. So we've got the hardware and the OEMs, the software, the operating system, and the application software, and they have OEMs too. Microsoft is the OEM for the operating system called Windows 10. And Apple is the OEM for the operating system called Mac. Hardware can be added or changed, and so can software. Complexity. Hardware, you can add printers, you can add disk drives, you can add scanners, you can add recording devices, you can add speakers, there's no limit to what you can add. The more you do, the more complex it's going to get, and the same for software. There are apps, software apps for everything you can imagine, keeping your pulse, sending updates to your grandkids. There are literally thousands of apps. One time there was someone attempted a couple of years ago to count them. The number is in the hundreds of thousands. Some people write apps just for a small group. Your bridge club, you write your own little app. Someone has the intelligence to do that, and the skill and the experience. So apps are everywhere. So now let me just go back to see, here's what we've talked about. Your computer, there's hardware, there's software. Under the software, there's the operating system and the application software. Under hardware, there's your main system hardware and all the peripherals. Peripherals are the things you add, printers, whatever. Okay, so now we've got some definitions out of the way. Before we do anything with support, we have to cover very briefly a topic, backup. Backup is the most important thing you'll ever learn about a computer, bar none. If you had a mainframe computer, you can't even get on that machine until you know how to back up. The reason is once you create a piece of data, you have to be able to save that data. Save is putting the data in a place, like a file. I'm saving it. I'm saving my work. I do it frequently. I write a letter every 10 minutes. I hit save just to save that. That is not backup. Save, it's done frequently during work. It does not create a second separate copy. Think of backup as a safe deposit box. You may have a will in your apartment, but you may also have a copy or the original over in a safe deposit box. Why? Because there might be a fire, or you might lose it, or there could be a flood. For whatever reason, you keep a second separate copy. And that's what you have to do with every piece of data you create on a computer. You must have a backup copy. Because there's a law in the universe that says if you only have one copy of something, it will get lost. And most of the time it's because we accidentally erase it. And then we say, where did that go? Oops, sorry, I jumped ahead. Backup puts a second separate copy on your computer. You could put it on a thumb drive. Maybe you've already all seen one of these things. It's a USB, sticks into a port on your computer. Here's a external disk drive. This holds 2 terabytes. That's more data than any of us would have in a lifetime. But that's all you need. You need something to keep a second copy. Don't let the only copy be in your machine, because goodness knows the machine will fail. And then you are really going to be mad. This thing, the second copy you're going to keep, will allow you to recover. Accidental erasure, the bigger. Got to watch for that. Windows 10 and Mac both have backup software already included. You don't have to go out and buy some fancy products. We'll talk later about inbred or inherent software versus purchasable or third-party software. But for now, just remember that the software is probably there. And some OEMs like Dell, Apple, others, they even add their own backup methods. So make sure you know how to use backup, if nothing else. Most importantly, backup is a future topic that Claire's going to cover from 2B computers. Don't miss that session. If there's anything you got to know, it's how to back up. Let's talk about the kinds of support. There's 2 principal kinds. There's how versus fix. We'll talk about that. And free versus pay. How versus fix. How to do something is a matter of education. How do I save a file? That is a matter of instruction. You have to know how to do that. Fix is when something is not functioning properly. I hit the save key and I get an error message. That could be something I'm doing, or it could be the machine. Maybe it doesn't have wherever you're trying to save it to. Maybe it's not plugged in. Sometimes, and I'll use sometimes gently, the fix is how. When someone calls up support and says, I can't save this file, sometimes it's just a matter of they don't know the right steps to save the file. So sometimes the fix equals the how, and if we don't use the hardware and software properly, we end up with this terrible thing called operator error. In the computer business, there's even codes for this. People put in, someone will call in and they'll explain the solution. For example, one of them is picnic. Problem is in the chair, not in the computer. It's an acronym. And there are a lot of these because this is a big problem. Since computers left vacuum tubes in the 1960s, this is the paradigm that holds for our computer business. Hardware reliability, hardware is more reliable than software, and software is more reliable than people. So if we remember this, it could kind of help us figure out what's happening. Most people immediately say, my hardware's failing. That's pretty rare. It really is. I know it may have happened to you. Software is getting better all the time. People, we're getting better. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes we don't remember. Let's talk about free versus pay. Free support you can get usually through your own effort. You do some research, trial and error maybe, you try different things. That's free. Some OEMs, Apple to be the biggest, they do provide free support of some types. It may be under warranty. Most all major OEMs like Dell or HP or Apple, if it's under warranty, you can get free support from them. We'll talk about how to do that. Of course, you can always contact your friends or relatives. I wouldn't do that too frequently with the friends because that leads to non-friends. Tech Tuesday. This is a great source of free support. Plymouth Harbor, we're very fortunate. Ann and Summer have developed a relationship with 2B Computers where you can get free support. If you haven't done this before, if you need help after one of the regular sessions, bring your detailed and specific question, or if you have a portable device, bring your device. That's free support. That's a good thing. I would take advantage of it. Let's talk about pay. There's 3 kinds of pay support. There's on-site. You can kind of guess what that is. They'll come to you. Carry-in and remote. On-site, the bugaboo here is travel. If they come to you somewhere, the cost of traveling to Plymouth Harbor has to be covered. It's maybe buried in the hourly rate. It might be separately chargeable to you, but you have to know what it is. Before you call someone, and we'll talk about who you can call, when you talk to them, before they come out, say, do you charge for travel? Am I going to be charged? And by the way, how far away are you? I mean, if you're in Bradenton or if you're in Tampa, it could be a pretty sizable charge to come down and help you. There's also minimum call charges. Some firms use this to help cover the travel time. They'll say there's a minimum of 1 hour or a minimum of 2 hours or whatever, because they believe, well, I can probably get to them and get the problem fixed. But a minimum is a way to help cover travel. Carry-in has 2 aspects. One, it's really great because you can take your machine to someone. We'll talk about some of these places, the Genius Bar. We just talked about Tech Tuesday, bringing your machine. That's a great thing. The downside of portable machines is they're usually more expensive to repair. The components are smaller. It's a little harder to get into them. It takes a little more expertise. So portability helps and portability hurts. Remote. There is, and I'm sure many of you have experienced it, you can have passive remote. You're having a phone conversation with someone. Or you can have what is sometimes called remote attachment or remote control. This is where you give up control of your machine to someone. They say, well, just download this little piece of software, put it on your machine, and then I'll be able to take control of your machine and I can look to see what's going on. It's a very good thing, but use great caution. Make sure you know the company you're dealing with, etc., because they can get into anything into your machine. You've given them like the keys to your safe deposit box. You want to be very careful. And if you do this, make sure at the end that you have them tell you how to remove the software. Because that little bit of software you put on there, if you don't remove it, it's going to be there forever. A hacker comes along and figures out how to get in, you are toast. So you must remove that software if you allow remote attachment. This last line, 2 years ago, Consumer Reports did a study of businesses that provide service. Banks, grocery stores, car dealers. The number 1 in terms of satisfaction was credit unions. And you could kind of understand that. You know, they're friendly, they're local, you know who they are. The worst, computer repair businesses. The majority of people didn't have a very good experience. So, if you're going to pay for some support, you might want to keep in mind that this is not going to go perfectly. Rarely does. Oops. Where to get support? Sorry. I got carried away. Pay support. Some cautions here. Before the repair, make sure you understand the charges. Did I mention back up your data before? Back up your data before you let them in. During and after the repair, make sure you take some notes. Ask for a demo. If your problem was you couldn't save the file to a USB drive, make sure they demo that for you. Can you do that for me? and ask for a layman's explanation of what they did. Don't let them say, well, I replaced the third capacitor in the fourth stack. That does not help you at all. You have to know what it was they did. Make sure you understand the warranty policy on that repair. Is it 90 days? Is it parts and labor? Is it just labor? Is it just parts? What is it? Let's go to, is there some kind of noise in here? Is that me? Am I doing that? Okay, I'll stand still. Where do we get support? There are three primary places. We can get local professional support nationwide or the OEMs. Remember, the people who made the hardware and the software. Local professional support, here we have two options. I mean, here at Plymouth Harbor. We have Plymouth Harbor IT, that's Stephen Parsons' shop, and we have 2B Computers. We're going to talk more about these here in a second. Nationwide support, these are just three examples of three large ones. The Geek Squad, associated with Best Buy, I'm sure you've heard of them, maybe you've used them. Office Max and Office Depot, these used to be two separate companies, they're now merged. They still keep their names, Office Max and Office Depot. Am I still making the noise? Is that better? Okay. I'm really sorry about that. There's a place called Youbreakifix. I don't know if you've ever used them or heard of them, but they're another national firm that does support. OEMs, these are the people who made the hardware and the software. There's three principal locations we can get OEM support. One is for software, in the menu bar. This is a menu bar. Let me go forward one so you can see. Here's a blown up. This is a menu bar from Excel, which is a common application. On the menu bar, you can see there's help. You can click on help, and it will provide possibly access to a website, or if it knows what you're trying to do, it may give you a couple ideas. On Excel, this is a nice form of context-sensitive help. Tell me what you want to do. You just put in there and say, I'd like to change the font size or whatever, and it'll try and tell you that. So this menu bar is a critical piece of every software. Here's another menu bar from VLC. This is a media player that I think now is packaged with Windows, I believe. Here, it too has help. And when you click on help, you can check for updates. We'll talk about updates in a second. Or you can just ask for help by pressing F1. Almost every piece of software made in the last 15 years, you can press F1, or if you're real old in computers, PF1, but F1, and it'll bring up the help screen for that application. So if you're in Microsoft Word and how do I get help? Just hit F1. It'll come up. Okay, let's go back to so there's the menu bar. It may have links to the OEM website when you press help. Updates, it'll tell you about updates. We're going to talk more about software updates, but this is a terribly abused concept in personal computers, and we'll talk about why in a second. PF1 or F1 equals help. That's what you got to remember. There's the product manual. I know most of you probably have thrown those away, or it came on a disk, and what are you going to do with that? So whatever, but let's talk about a product manual. Let me do a bigger example. This is a Google search. I hope you recognize that. I put in my printer, Canon MX922. I want to see the manual. And if I put in PDF, it'll give me just sites that have the PDF manual, because I forgot how to put in my printer cartridge. I want a picture. I want something to tell. I don't know how to do that anymore. I only do it once every 6 months. This will tell me, aha, here it is from Canon printers. Yep, I can click on there and I can go to the manual for that printer. So the product manual, just ask Google for it. If you've lost it or whatever, you don't remember what it is, just ask Google, you'll find it. And then lastly, OEM live support. Let's talk about that. If you're talking to an OEM, remember that's the person who made the hardware or the software, This could be a phone call, live phone. Could be a chat. I don't know if any of you have ever used a chat, but a chat is a two-way typing conversation with a support person. They're not live, and you'll quickly come to realize that they're not just talking to you. They're talking to 3 or 4 other people simultaneously. But it's more productive for them, and it is a little frustrating, but it can be better than not talking to anyone. So a chat is one kind of live support. And there's also in-person live support. We'll talk more about Apple in a second, which is a unique case. Usually a chat or a phone number, whatever, is available at the OEM's website. If you want to talk to Dell, go to Dell.com. Go to their website. You can find support or whatever, and then you can find that phone number and usually a chat or whatever. Check the product warranty, your product warranty, before you contact them. You got to know if you're covered under warranty. Is the machine 6 months old or 6 years old? This will have something to do with whether or not they talk to you and what, if anything, they charge you. Speaking of charging, it can be free or it can be pay. There is no free support for Microsoft Windows. You cannot talk to someone from Microsoft about Microsoft Windows. That's unfortunate. They're just too huge. I mean, they have millions and millions of users. It would be impossible. Apple, however, you can talk to Apple. This is a really great feature. Their main site, by the way, and again, you have your handout. You're going to take this with you. They have a main site and they have a Genius Bar. If you haven't been to the Genius Bar, this is a location. We're fortunate. There's one out at UTC right over here. You can take your machine in there or even your iPad or iPhone, and they will help you with the problem. You talk to a real person across a little kind of desk. You tell them what the problem is, and they help you, and they show you how to make it work, whatever that function is that you couldn't get to work. It's a wonderful thing. Now, you do need an appointment for the Genius Bar. You can do a walk-in, but I'd recommend you get an appointment first. Hardware OEMs, Dell, HP, the others, they often have support too. Might be chargeable, might not, but you can find them, again, on the web. And the application software OEMs, they may or may not have support. Adobe, they do have support. For, let's say you have Photoshop or Lightroom or something, you can probably talk to them. Again, warranty is going to be a factor here. So make sure you know what your warranty is. Oops. I want to show you this drawing. We talked about this once before. Your computer, the hardware, software. Now, I'd like to point out the OEMs. So there's OEM support for your hardware. These are the people who made it and sold it, Dell, Apple, HP. There's the OEM support for the peripherals. We looked at a Canon printer. We looked at the manual. And there's OEM support here for the operating system and the application software. And if you look closely at this graphic, you'll notice something odd or something unique here. This person, Apple, is the OEM for the hardware, and Apple's also the OEM for the software. This is what allows Apple to do such a very good job of support and controlling their product, because they're both the hardware and the software. Nowhere else in the industry, practically, and on a large scale, does this happen. But that's why Apple is so unique when it comes to personal computers. Okay. Again, you have this in your handout. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But just quickly, what this is a table, as of last week, of who the providers are. We've talked about all these people. How to contact them. How do you get help from IT? Well, you have to dial 567 and open a work order. How do you get the Geek Squad? You dial one of these numbers. Do they provide on-site support? In other words, will they come out? Some do, some don't. Can you carry in the device to them? Some do, some don't. Will they provide phone support? Can you get immediate phone support? Not, I'll call you back next week. What's the callback time if you can't? What do they charge? And is there an annual contract available? We're not going to go through all these, but this should, I hope, help you determine what options do I have? What is it going to cost me? Who could I call? And do I want to do any of these things? Nothing is free, but some of these are a pretty good deal. We already talked about Apple is certainly one of them. Here's some notes, by the way, about what service contracts are and whatever. So we're not going to go through this, but you might want to keep this handy. Again, this is as of last week. This changes phenomenally. And remember, keep your expectations in line. These people may be national, but they're prone to failures just like every other business. Okay, now let's get to we are the support. You are the support. You're going to try and do it yourself. The first thing we want to say is the most successful thing you can do when you have a problem is restart the machine. Restart has a specific meaning, which we'll talk about in a second, but starting the machine over, if it has software or if it's an old machine with relays, starting over is the key way for the machine to get a fresh start and say, okay, let me try it again. I'll get it right this time.
Is that called rebooting?
Rebooting is another word for this. Before you get into self-help or trying to help yourself, did I mention back up your data? You gotta do that. Restart is usually done via a function called shutdown. Shutdown is an orderly way to tell your machine to stop. Think of your car. When you park your car in a garage or even in a parking spot, you come in, you apply the brake, you put it in park, you turn off the lights, you turn off the ignition. That was an orderly shutdown. You don't just come in and say, okay, that's it, turn off the ignition and coast to a stop. Because you're going to have trouble starting it up, it's going to kill your battery. I mean, you have to have an orderly way to stop. Most people think, well, I'll just stop the computer by holding down the power button. Yeah, that'll stop it, but that's not very good for the machine. So we want to use, if we can, this shutdown process. If you have a Windows computer, I think you know how to do this. You press the Windows key, the power button, and then shut down. If you can't get there, you can use these three keys simultaneously. Control, Alt, Delete. You don't have to remember this. You're going to take this handout with you. Here's how you do it on an Apple. If you cannot shut down, and there are some problems that the software prevents you from shutting down. It will not turn off. Then go to the power button, hold it down 3 seconds, 5 seconds, depending on the manufacturer. It'll turn off. That's a last resort, but if you have to use it, that's how you do it. After you shut down or after you forced power off, I think in Apple, by the way, this is called forced quit or something. It has a slightly different term. Forced quit? Is that right? Okay. Then you want to restart it. You know, people used to say, well, give it 10 seconds or whatever. The reason they say that, and some of it's still true, is it does have a spinning disk. Many machines still have spinning disks in them. So give it a few seconds to the disk stops, and then restart it. It's not life and death, but it helps the machine a little bit. And then ask yourself, if the problem began when you added a piece of hardware or software, of course, you're well on your way to finding out what the problem is. So you could remove that hardware or software and then test it again. Does now the save function work or whatever it was you couldn't do before? Talk about the internet. This is the biggest source of self-help. The internet is a phenomenal bit of, not a bit, billions of bits of information. You can do research on the web via the internet. It takes time and patience. Some people even think it can be fun. It's interesting. It's a puzzle. It's like making a jigsaw puzzle. You know, you're looking for the piece that fits there. Well, it's not going to be the first piece you pick up. You might have to look for a while. You have to look around, and you have to well, that doesn't sound like it. Let me try something else. But there's a lot of help out there. A couple tips. Enter the problem description as accurately as you can, which is a good thing because you have to know really what your problem is. But just don't put in, will not start. That's not going to do something. Be specific. If you have a Windows machine, say, Windows 10, I cannot start my machine or whatever. Natural language processing, which the web uses, is much better than it used to be. So you just kind of type in as much as you can the description. It'll help find an answer for you. probably many answers. Okay, searching on the web. There's the OEM's website. We talked about that. You remember the OEM, the people who made it? Microsoft, Dell, Apple, whatever. You can go to their website. There's also something called communities. If you're trying to figure out what's wrong with your machine, it can be helpful to go to a community. A community is usually a group of individuals. Many of them are novices, but there are a few who really get their kicks from helping other people or solving difficult technical problems. In a community, you can go out there and post a question. You know, for the past 3 weeks, every Saturday morning, my machine shuts off. And someone out there will say, "Ooh, that sounds interesting. Let me see if I can help you." And they'll respond to you, and you have a little conversation. These communities, at Microsoft, there's one, Apple has one, the hardware OEMs have one, all have one. And these two are pretty well used too, Bleeping Computer and Computer Hope. So again, these are places where you ask a question. You won't get an immediate response. You might. It might be the next day or whatever. But if you're hunting down something, it can be very helpful, these communities. Google, or whatever your favorite search engine is. One of the things, if you're going to go hunting for support, you have to know how to do is filter by date. Let me show you if I... Okay. Let's say, here's that search I was doing for my printer, because I couldn't remember how to replace the printer cartridge. Over on the right in Google, if you use Bing and Yahoo, it might be towards the center, but there's something either called tools or filters or whatever. Press that tools button and you'll get these two choices, anytime and all results. Under any time, you can say, I want just the past year or the past 24 hours or whatever. If you don't say anything and you ask about my Windows 10 will not start, you'll probably get 1 million hits. So help yourself by winnowing it down, maybe even to the past month. That might help. Let's see where. Okay, so, and YouTube. Many of us are visual learners. If someone would just on the screen show me how to do it, show me the right buttons to press, you can find that on YouTube. YouTube searches just like Google because Google owns YouTube. YouTube is the visual version of Google. Lots of people put stuff out there, some good, some bad. One of the things you might want to check for are the dates and the number of views. If someone put out something on YouTube, you look down on the bottom and it said, well, I put it out there 3 years ago and 4 people have seen it, that's probably not a good indication. But if 10,000 people have seen it and you put it up last month, lots of people are interested in that. And they're going back because it's probably helpful. So try and, if you can, use a little filters to find things on YouTube, especially if you're a visual learner. Let's talk about, this saying exists in a lot of industries. Perfect is the enemy of good. We're trying to do something so perfectly that we never get it done. In the PC business, this comes down to what software you add or what hardware you add to your machine. Your machine comes with, if you're Windows, it comes with antivirus software. Is it the best antivirus software in the world? No, probably not. Maybe you could find another one that's better, and which will change then next year. There'll be another one that's better, whatever. So you can keep running down and try and find the perfect piece of antivirus software. But it's going to drive you nuts. And if you keep adding all these different products, you're going to increase the complexity. So you got to ask yourself, do I really have to have the absolute best? Or is what the machine comes with good enough for me? Limit, if you can, additional hardware and software until you are proficient. If you're not real proficient, I wouldn't go out and start adding 15 different programs because you heard this is a great antivirus software, and this is a great search software, and this is you'll drive yourself nuts. You don't want to do that. I'm sure you know the expression, KISS. Keep it simple, sailor, or keep it simple, stupid, or whatever, but KISS applies to the support business. KISS helps. Let's talk about this expression, which is run rampant in the computer industry. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. People will tell you this. There are companies who've done this. A recent hack, by the way, of Microsoft Exchange servers where 800,000 emails were released. That hack, because the employees believed this. They said the machine's working fine. I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to introduce, a new level of software or whatever. They have an update, but they didn't say what it was about. Well, the manufacturer cannot tell you what they're doing. And let me tell you why. Let's say you know that there's a back door or a defect in the password entry field. That if you put in 9876 my grandmother, it'll open up for anything. The point is, if there's a defect, the software manufacturer can't come out and say, hey, there's a defect that says if you enter 123 my grandmother, everything will open up. They can't tell you that because all the bad guys will do that. So all they can do is say, we have some important security updates. We have some fixes, whatever. Take them. Take them. The company went through a lot of trouble to do it. They're hoping that you'll do it. Those people who had the Microsoft Exchange servers, and these are big companies, they were just plumb out of their head. They were lazy. They should have done what the manufacturer said. But they think, oh, I'm smarter than Microsoft. I don't need that. And they got themselves in a world of trouble. Most ransomware comes from this same problem. Microsoft and Apple, they know how to stop that stuff, but they can't do it unless you help by putting it on your machine. Now, Apple and Microsoft recently have gone to forced updates. They'll force you to take a software update. You can stop them if you want, but now it's kind of like the nudge theory. Let's make the default take it. So don't stop software updates. Let them happen. And if you see one for a piece of software you have, take the update. We're not going to go through this, but if you are really hardcore, you want to try, here's the diagnostic process. These steps are what you have to do. So we're not going to go into this. I'm going to assume that there's just maybe one or two of you in the room who might be interested in really getting down into the nitty-gritty. But a couple things I've underlined: back up your data. And then restart, of course, before you try and fix your problem. Document the steps you take. Even if you're just trying to fix a minor problem, write it down just on a piece of paper next to your computer, what you're doing and what you've already tried. And lastly, if you do find the fix, write it down. Because the odds are you're going to need it again. And in 2 years, you're going to say, I remember a problem like that. I remember my printer wouldn't print on both sides of the paper. How did I solve that? Well, when you go do your own support, document it so you know what you're doing and what you've done. Diagnostic tools. Microsoft and Apple have gone through a lot of effort to put diagnostic tools onto their equipment and into their software. I strongly suggest you use them. Same with the hardware people. HP, Dell, they have all of them. Lenovo, they all have, most all of them have diagnostic tools. Those tools might say, check this, check that the operating system is functioning, check I don't have any errors on my hard drive. I'm not going to go into all of that because, again, there's just a few of you who might want to go that deeply. Detailed steps can usually be found on the web via search. By the way, we are considering having maybe a class in the future about really getting down into the Mac or down into a PC if you were really wanted to go deep. We're thinking of doing that. Let's talk about third-party, non-OEM. This means, by the way, when you see this phrase, non-OEM, means I am not the person who made the machine, and I'm not the person who gave you the software on your initial machine. I'm someone else. Who am I? I'm someone that I think I can do a better job. I can do a better job of finding viruses. I can do a better job of diagnosing your hard drive. So I'm called a third party or a non-OEM, and I sell diagnostic tools. There's a large market for this. Some of them are very commonly known: Crystal Disk, CCleaner, PC Doctor. There's a lot of them. They're usually not free, although they may have a free version that you can get initially. But if you want the advanced features, then you have to pay for something, whatever. There's mixed results in the industry about these. Some people really do have good ideas, and it is better software. It may help you solve or determine whether a problem is hardware or software. So, I mean, they can have their uses. It does add complexity. You just installed another piece of software, or maybe you installed all 3 of these softwares or more of them. Sometimes you'll go to help someone and they'll have 6 or 7 of these on their machine because they thought, well, one of them was bound to find the problem. I'll just keep putting these on until eventually my problem goes away. Well, it doesn't. You're just increasing the complexity. Be very cautious. Oh, and back up before using any of these, especially software that can delete files. Some of these software will say, well, I'm going to delete your junk files you haven't used. Duh, be very careful. Don't let that happen. Okay, let's just summarize. The 3 most important things you can do: save your work, frequently, whatever, back up, must back up, and know how to restart. Know how to shut down and power on your machine. For general advice, use the OEM's help and their website. Go to them, find what they have available for you to use. Go to their community if you want some interaction with other users. Research the web. This is your greatest tool. The web has so much information, and it can help you determine between fix and how. The biggest bugaboo, which is operator error. And if you can, reduce the complexity, at least until you're proficient. I mean, when you're a really strong user, fine, you can go out and put on 6 different word processing programs and 4 different email packages and run them all. But until then, I would advise against it. In closing, I think we made it. There's a survey coming to your email. I hope you filled out the thing. We're just going to ask, please, just 3 or 4 questions to help us determine how can we make this better, or was it of any value at all? So this will be your chance to give us some feedback. Pat and I are very interested in knowing whether this helped or it hurt or we should have taken a different approach or whatever. Thank you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your attention. And good luck in your fixing. I hope you find the answer. Thanks.